Welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast, where we're sharing stories from real estate investors and how investing has changed their lives. This episode of Inspire to Invest has been brought to you by Control and Compound Financial. Hey everybody, welcome to the Inspire to Invest podcast. I have an amazing guest today named Nicole Fiore, and she has a company called Coast to Coast Homes with her husband, Colin. And before we dive into questions, I'll give you a little bit of background on Nicole and why I wanted her to be on this podcast for today. So her and her husband, Colin, began their real estate journey after attending a weekend transformative workshop. They prioritized learning, networking, building a team, and then they landed their first property. And so much has happened since then. They've committed to their growth and building a portfolio, and it's gone from single family homes to joint ventures, capital raising, multifamily, and land development. And literally they've built their portfolio, in the East Coast, but also all across the country. They have a motto: connecting good people with good homes. So Colin and Nicole provide quality housing and profitable opportunities. So I think that's nice. Those things go hand in hand. And their confidence, ongoing education, and adaptability drive their success in the dynamic real estate industry. So thank you so much for being here today, Nicole.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I wish Colin could be here as well, but he's sick a little bit like you.
Yeah, gotta go join him there, right?
Yeah.
So I guess what I want to know to begin with is, what did life look like before real estate for you guys? Because I really just want to lay that framework as to like where you started and what that catalyst was to really change your trajectory to where you guys are right now.
Right. Yeah. Some people know this, but I always say that I am still a teacher. I feel like once a teacher, always a teacher. So I was a high school teacher. I was in Vancouver. And then Colin so I taught English and history. And then Colin was like I just call him an IT guy, senior IT consultant. He was, we were in Vancouver because he was the head of the Evergreen line. It's a SkyTrain line that they were building in Vancouver. Yeah. And so we were living in Montreal at the time, and we decided we wanted to go someplace exotic. And because his company had all these like opportunities across the world, in Africa, in South America. And then this opportunity came up, and we were like, well, Vancouver's exotic enough. Yeah. For people living in Montreal, Vancouver was very exotic. So we moved there. And yeah, essentially we went to this Keyspire workshop. Yeah. And I always say that it changed the trajectory of our life completely. Yeah. Because we saw real estate as a more of a driver to get to where we wanted to go. Yeah. I think we always considered the value of real estate. Yeah.
And how long ago was that?
2016 is when we joined.
Okay.
And then back in 2012, Colin had purchased a triplex with one of his friends. Yeah. And so we all lived there together in one of the suites, and then we rented out the other suites. Yeah. And that was initially our sort of venture into real estate. Yeah. But to be honest,
hacking before you knew what house hacking was.
Exactly. Yeah. It was a JV too, but we didn't. If only we had like lessons of what we should be planning and what how we should be forward thinking and have an exit strategy, because, when we moved from Montreal to Vancouver, they bought that triplex for $630,000 in 2012. And we moved to Vancouver in 2013 and sold our half because we didn't think we'd be back. And we, held on to whatever cash we had and thought maybe we'll be able to buy something in Vancouver. But at the time in East Van, where we moved, like empty lots were selling for like $750,000. So, we just realized the vast difference in property values. So we held off and we didn't buy anything. Although I wish, you kind of think back, you're like, well, maybe we could have made something work. Anything would have been great to get into back in 2013. But we didn't, and we were renters in Vancouver. I think that's why we were renters for a lot of our adult life. And we have this really strong, I have an affinity for tenants, right? Like I just feel very strongly that they should be provided safe homes and treated with respect. Because I feel like when you treat your tenants with respect and you treat the property that you're giving them, which ends up being their home, then that's how they treat it as well.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that. I've seen that play out. The properties that we like manage ourselves, the ones that we still own in Ontario, though we have long-term tenants, and they're very, very, they're very good to us. You know, like they do a lot of the work that's required, but you know, they have no issues emailing or calling us and saying, hey, we need this or this or this. And we just say, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Go provide that. Because when you're not there, right, like physically in the space where your tenants are, you do have to rely a lot on them. So being able to provide everything that they need, and then like as quickly as possible, it shows them that you want them to, you know, like feel like that place is their home, and that you'll do what they need.
Yeah,
so
no, that's smart.
That's often reciprocated.
Yeah.
Sure. That was how we moved from, I guess, a teacher and an IT consultant into being into viewing real estate more as what's going to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah.
It wasn't the final push, because I guess we still thought of it as a side hustle back then.
So then what was that jump then? So you went to the summit and you kind of learned.
Yeah.
And what did you guys do next? Like, what was your first adventure, and where did it go from there?
So being people from Vancouver, renting in Vancouver, not having a home, we couldn't refinance our home and get a bunch of equity and start investing that way. But we also weren't going to be the working partner in a proper, like physically doing all the work in Vancouver, because again, we had 2 full-time jobs, and that wasn't necessarily the path that we saw. Yeah. And like, it's hard to buy. Even just a tear down in Vancouver in 2013 was $1 million. Yeah. So that's when we started our own private lending. That's when we started lending out our RSP. Yeah. Because we had amassed a certain amount. And when I say we, it was mostly Colin. I was a teacher, right? We just have a pension, and you put like just tiny little bits, but he had a corporate job they did great matching. So we had, you know, a good share of RSPs. And after that weekend workshop, we're like, okay, I believe in the power of real estate. Yeah. And so we moved it all from, you know, Desjardins into a trust company. Yeah. And that's when we started researching how to do it. At the time, it wasn't just one company. There was a few companies that you could choose from. Yeah. So we put some here and some here, and we invested with land development, and we invested with syndicated mortgages, and we invested privately. Yeah. And we did all of that, but that process made us really understand what it's like to be a lender. Yeah. And in that time period, I think a lot of people saw, because Colin was the one who would walk people through the process. They'd be like, so I feel like you're doing some private lending. Can you show me how to move my money from the bank? It's not a very difficult process. I know you know that. But
it's almost like people need that hand holding. Like, they haven't gone through the education like you guys did. Yeah. You know, I feel like what you're describing is very similar to my journey as well. Just getting educated on it. Now, once people become familiar with the fact that you're doing it, then they look at you as that resource, right? And they lean on you just to show them the way and kind of shine that light.
Yeah, exactly. And so we did that, and that's what we did for a year, alongside researching markets and building our team. Yeah. And that was a huge thing. When we first looked to real estate investing, we looked at 3 different markets. We looked at Winnipeg, St. Catharines, Ontario, and Cambridge, Ontario. They were all good markets at the time, and we eventually just chose Cambridge because of our realtor. We had connected with a realtor. She was extremely helpful, and she also had a few other contacts within the Cambridge market. Yeah. So she had like a team of contractors, and we connected with her, really. That's truly it. And then we bought the house that smelled like cat piss, because she walked through it and she said, woo, I'm the only one that's going there for you guys. So and in a market at that time, it was 2017 when we purchased. So we bought it within the first year. Yeah. in that market, it was actually like things were going in Cambridge, $150,000 over asking.
Yeah. Well, 2017 is kind of when things really started to shift here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but nobody looked at this house because it smelled like cat pee. And
Got to the door and walked out.
yeah, exactly. She hated it. She's like, I don't know if I'm going to go downstairs for you guys. And then she's like, oh, okay. She went downstairs and checked it out. And so that's the house that we purchased. So
Yeah.
in a market that was going $150,000 over asking, we got it for asking, right? Like we
And what
got
would
it.
that have cost at that point in time?
Yeah.
So what would that have like the list price been at that point in time?
Oh, what was it?
What was the list price?
Oh, I think it was 340.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was either 340 or 380. I can't remember.
So basically the cost of like a shed in Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah. No, we weren't gonna get anything, not even a condo. You couldn't even get a condo
Yeah.
in Vancouver at that time for that amount. So yeah, we bought that house. So it was already like a bare basement. They had already demoed whatever was there before. And we put the suite in, and then we renovated the upper level a little bit, like kitchen and bathroom.
Yeah.
And then that was our duplex, and that was the first property that we held on to. Refinanced eventually. We were able to pull all our money out, and that eventually became the down payment for our next property that we purchased when we moved from Vancouver to Ontario.
Nice.
We still hold that property, and I think we've refinanced twice.
Nice.
So, and it's up until the last interest rate hike, I think it's probably just barely cash flowing, but it's cash flowed wonderfully this whole time.
Yeah. And it served a bigger purpose of just helping you put that into your other investments, right?
Yeah.
So you said that you were a teacher before, so I'm assuming you're not a teacher now. So how long did it take you then to go from, buying this first property to moving over into investing full time?
So I sort of like fell into real estate investor full time by accident, just because I had 2 kids, and then we moved across the country, and then, the pandemic with, lockdowns. So it just happened that I didn't go back into teaching after my daughter, like our youngest became the age that she'd go into daycare. We moved twice in that time period. So I could go back, and we talk about it still, because Colin still works for full time.
Yeah.
But it's a bit tricky. He's got the benefits, and he's been there for 20 years. He has this like great like history. And so banks prefer that kind of T4 as opposed to, oh, you're just a substitute teacher now. And the reality is that as a real estate investor, unfortunately, there's still no magic, solution to say, that the banks are going to give you a mortgage on a new home with no T4s. Like, yes, we can set things up where we have money from our corp, and, but that's a bit of a process.
Yeah.
So, we've unfortunately made the decision that he's going to keep that job, so that because we haven't moved into our forever home, we are going to need that.
So it serves the purposes that you need now. But to your point, when you talk about qualifying, I think that's why so many investors, there's a number of reasons, but why they're also attracted to multifamily, right?
Right.
Because it's actually easier to qualify for a bigger property than for a smaller one. So I think a lot of investors don't realize like how the banks actually look at that stuff, right?
Right. Yeah. And so we really like multifamily because what ends up happening is that, and this happened to us, we own 2 homes in Ontario, and that was the end of our qualifying power, essentially, because homes in Ontario have huge mortgages.
Yeah.
And so that's a great opportunity for somebody who has a lot of assets. So they look good they look good in one sense, but they can no longer qualify for a traditional mortgage. However, if you're going to find a multifamily property, as some of us know, it's the apartment building that qualifies for the mortgage, but you still have to be, in the corporation, or you still have to be there, as part of it. And if you own a lot of assets, that's what the bank is looking for. So Multifamily is a good opportunity for somebody who does have lots of assets. They can't buy, they can't buy another duplex or fourplex because they've, they have no more mortgage capabilities. The banks won't give them another mortgage, but the bank will look at them and look at all their assets and say, okay, you can support, if something happens to this building, you can support that with all your other buildings. So that's the wonderful part of multifamily. And that's eventually what we started purchasing. Not solely us, but we partner with other people to purchase multifamily.
Yeah. So what does your portfolio look like today then? It's been, I guess, 7 years since you got started.
Can't believe it's been that long. Yeah, 2016 is when we joined. 2017 is when we bought our first property. Our second property that we essentially did the same thing. We did a house hack though, because we lived in one half. Was 2019. And then end of 2020, beginning of and then all of 2021 is when we built our portfolio to where it stands today. I never remember exactly how many. I know that in 2021
there's so many I can't remember.
Well, we bought 30 properties in 2021.
Wow.
Some of them we sold, some like after the fact, we bought it in a portfolio and then we sold a few after. Some of them were flips. So those were always planned to sell. And, I think we did own 1, 2, 3, 4. We did own 5 multifamilies and then we've since sold one.
Yeah. That's obviously a big jump to go from we bought 1, we bought 2, and then we bought 30.
Yeah, I know.
So for anyone that's watching, how did you do that? I'm sure most people would be like, what the heck?
I know. So you skipped over the good part, Nicole. Yeah. No, I mean, I did. I skipped over the good part. And the good part was joining another. So Keyspire, I always tell people, Keyspire is this amazing program that made us completely change our perspective and changed our trajectory. We would still be just a teacher and an IT consultant right now, probably, with maybe, a basement suite. Yeah. But we decided, we eventually joined another mentorship program. So some of the stage presenters from the Keyspire program have a mentorship program, Corey and Tiffany Young. And that was the program that made us make that switch from side hustle to business. And when you think of your real estate investing as your business, it really does shift how you start operating. And then when you change how you operate, other people change how they see you. Yeah. And that was a really big, it was pivotal for us. I still remember the moment that I remember seeing, I was in the kitchen. We were living in this place that was completely open concept, which was great. Except when the pandemic hit, it was the home office, the kids' play table, the kitchen, the living room, the playroom, TV, it was everything. So I was in the kitchen, Colin was in the living room, which was 5 feet away from me. And he was talking to a commercial mortgage manager at, National Bank here in Moncton or something like that. And I was like, oh, he's a real estate investor. Everything that he's asking, that's who he is. That's who he sees himself as. And then I saw him as that. And I think that was a very important shift for us, because then we started providing opportunities to the public. And again, during COVID, it was a time when people were very open to having these kinds of conversations over online. I think originally there would be always, that you would necessarily have to see someone in person in order to invest with them. That was typically what you do. Whereas now you couldn't do that. And so, but that opened up the possibilities of people so for me to talk to somebody across the country. Yeah. And so that's essentially what started happening. We started having opportunities come to us because of our networking, because of, getting into the Moncton market at a certain time and, creating relationships with certain people. These opportunities started coming to us, and then we started providing them to our community. And, we had already built these relationships with people who maybe called us and said, hey, can you walk me through the private lending process? And so we had this and we shared everything. We started just sharing everything online, everything that we did.
Yeah.
Because we'd gone through to sort of flip to yourself.
Yeah.
And that, I think, gave people, I guess, it brought us to their attention, essentially. And then when we had these opportunities, we started having conversations, and it's just kind of like a momentum thing that starts happening. And 2021 was a time when you could buy a duplex in Moncton for $200,000.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that was very attractive.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Now,
and you could still cash flow with it.
When you look back at these 7 years then, like, would you define that year as, your biggest success, or is there something else that stands out in your mind to be like, that was really like our biggest success?
So I really think that it's been the year that we took off is more of a success for us, because that was the time when we took a moment. We had another mental shift. And so now we're not just looking at it as a business, but we're looking at it as building out a business. And seeing, and I feel like this past year has been way more transformational, because we are not just looking at this as a small business. We're entrepreneurs, and changing that, having that mindset really makes you start looking at how to build out systems, how to hire people. And then there's this whole other side of it that feels, I'm searching for another word other than legacy, but it's kind of what it feels like. It's like, it's building out this much bigger thing.
Well, you're building like your generational wealth, right? Like, it's something that you can literally pass on to your family. And you think, if that continued, how that kind of goes down the chain and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's much more long-term thinking, as I guess is all I can think. Like, we bought a bunch of homes in 2021, and we, bought them with the idea, like long-term buy and hold, but and the idea that maybe the cash flow would be able to support us. But as we all know, cash flow is not reliable. It really just isn't. Especially when interest rates just change, so quickly, within the span of a year. Now, a lot of people ask me about all of our Moncton properties. I had this question on the weekend, like, you don't seem really stressed about the interest rates. I'm like, well, that's because it depends on how big the change is, but even a big change in interest rate to a small mortgage is okay, right? All of our properties. I think
that's an important point, is that you went into markets where you stood the chance to cash flow, right? Like, you didn't go somewhere where you're already in the negative. Like, I think sometimes people were in these different markets where, if they're already walking that line, well, change in interest rate is going to have a big impact on you, right? And then you're maybe offloading properties, or you're trying to like inject more money in from another property. Like, it all depends, right?
Right.
But now I want to go into some of the lessons and obstacles, but I just want to take a really brief break for a word from our sponsors first.
Hey, Christina Wyatt here from Control and Compound. You might have heard the term infinite banking recently. It's getting more and more popular in the real estate community. Well, I've got Darren Mitchell here, the infinite banking guru, to tell you about it in 60 seconds.
So how does infinite banking work? Well, an infinite banking type policy is going to be high cash value. What that means is we're going to grow our cash value inside this insurance policy as fast as we can. This money is going to stay and compound tax-free for the rest of your life. But because you have that, you can leverage other money. The insurance company will loan you 90% of your cash value, but they'll loan you their money. Your money stays in the policy. Their money is automatically loaned to you. You put that money in real estate. You do some great real estate deals. You pay the loan back. You rinse and repeat. The whole time you're doing this, your money's growing completely tax-free, plus you're multiplying the money, plus you have a death benefit. When you hit retirement, what do? Now you start taking tax-free loans from the policy to top up your retirement income, an extra 50, 100 grand a year. That money, you don't pay that money back till death. Then there's a massive death benefit. The death benefit pays off the policy loans, and there's lots left over, tax-free death benefit to your family. That's infinite banking. And at Control and Compound, we are the experts at infinite banking for real estate investors. To learn more, go to Control and Compound.
back to Inspire to Invest. I have Nicole here with me from Coast to Coast Homes, and she's talking about how she was able to go from a couple rental properties to buying 30 properties all in the same year, and basically what shifted with that. So we talked about, some of those successes and that shift in your mindset to go from cash flow to thinking of like your legacy and your long-term wealth for your family. Now, can we talk a little bit about your lessons? Like, what would you say has been some of the biggest learnings and obstacles that you've faced and learned over the last few years?
So when you move really quickly, that's when things sort of, I don't want to say fall through the cracks, because I think that Colin and I, over that year, as towards the ending of the year or maybe into 2022, I think we were like this, trying to like catch everything, right? I think we did a pretty good job of that. But it was that's hard, right? It's hard on a person, it's hard on a couple, a relationship, it's hard on a family. We also moved again in that time period. And so one of the things that, one of the biggest lessons is that I think that we needed to slow down a little bit earlier, which fair enough, whatever, people go. And when you have the opportunity, you take it. It's very, very normal, especially with like, once you get into that entrepreneurial mindset, like I think that people just naturally just want to take on all the opportunities. But so now we have a different criteria of what we're looking for, right? And what we didn't have initially was that criteria. We just picked anything that looked good. If we ran the numbers and it looked good, yeah, perfect. Why not? But now that we have a different criteria and we've taken the time to think about that, it's a lot easier to say, that's a great opportunity, but that's not for us. And that, or so it's not for us.
What would that look like? Because that another interview and they talked about that as well, as just, aligning all your decisions with what your long-term goal is. So for you guys, like, what is that? Like, what does it take for something to measure up in your mind?
So it's something that needs to be able to pay out. So we need to be able to figure out how to pay ourselves now, as opposed to paying ourselves in 5 to 7 years from now. Right. And so that's been a big learning step, because it is tricky to have those conversations with, and not investors. Like, most people understand that, you have to be paid in order to do the job that you're doing. But sometimes you have to even have that mindset shift in yourself to say that, yes, I deserve to be paid, right? Like, for the work that I'm doing. So we need to have that now, but really, like, in Moncton is still a really great market. Like, people are still moving here. The opportunities are still here. Things are moving quickly off the market once again, like they were back in 2021. But we're not necessarily looking at that anymore, because there's a lot more we can do with a 32 unit building versus, like 16 duplexes. There's a lot more to manage with 16 duplexes. There's a lot more partners. There's a lot more. It's not the same. And so that's another thing, like, because we made the decision not to retire Colin early, he'll still be working for a little while. Like, we really do need to reclaim our time. So there's a time thing. There's a initial upfront capital thing. And then again, like, what's good right now? Like, right now, land development is something that a lot of people are interested. The for-purpose rentals, like the for-purpose new builds, are really important right now. Not just in terms of, I don't know what people are talking about, but also in terms of what we need, right? This country needs homes.
And you've got to think about what's needed, right? And where you're going to invest your time. Right. When you think about, having your portfolio and managing them and stuff like that, what would you say is the craziest thing that you guys have experienced so far?
Well, I think we picked up a couple of apartment buildings that were not, the mix of suites was a bit, I guess, undesirable. Most people don't want to pick up a building that has a bunch of studios and 1-bedrooms, but we bought one. And when we did the walkthrough of the first one, I wasn't there for that one, but Colin has some good stories he's like, we did our walkthrough today. It was the first time we got to see it in person. The cops were called. Like,
oh no.
Yeah. So it was one of those things, but it was also, I mean, that's an opportunity for growth, right?
Yeah.
Because we had purchased it in January. I think Colin, I remember, called the RCMP again, maybe this January, or I think it was about a year later. And he said, hey, I would love to know the stats on how often you get called to this building now, because they have that. And he's like, oh yeah, like the person he spoke with, he's like, oh, I know that building. We used to go there all the time.
Oh dear.
They almost never go anymore. So it was, like a very clear reduction in what it was. And that was a long process. And that was a huge learning curve for us. And we had to, let go of one property manager and have, follow up with another property manager. And, but that was, it was along those learnings that we realized that one of our assets is actually that we are problem solvers.
Yeah.
Like the world of real estate investing is not all, roses. It's not a golden path, to like a pot of gold at the end of the road. So we really see ourselves now as problem solvers.
Yeah.
That's one of our main jobs. And we do that really well.
Yeah. And I think that's how you can demonstrate yourself as an expert for your joint venture partners and people looking to invest, because you can talk now about the experiences you've had and like how you've made something better and, come out successful on the other side, right?
Yeah.
Now you talked about, building your long-term wealth. Like, is there a particular financial freedom number that you and Colin have discussed that, it doesn't mean that it's the be all and end all, but like when you could say, well, maybe he would retire if X came to be?
I don't know we've always toyed around with a number, and we've gotten or close to that number, but it's more the security and the long term. Like, I think we'd have to have acquired that regularly for a long time for us to feel comfortable doing that. But it's more of a timeline. I think, like, we both love what we do, and if as long as we can balance two, like the fact that he works full time and the fact that this is also full time, then we'll keep going. But I kind of said in 2 years. Okay. I don't know. It was when
it's not that far away.
School.
That's going to be here before you know it, right?
Yeah, I know. I know.
Now, what would you say is the best advice that you guys have ever been given?
I think it was from Corey and Tiffany, and it was right before we had our very first opportunity to put out. And they said that you are the people who are investing in you, not your opportunity.
Yeah.
You have to tell who you are. Like, that's what you put out there. You don't write a blurb on like how amazing this asset is and what the ROI is going to be and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not that. People are investing in you, not necessarily the building.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, there's even been people that have sent things my way, and just how they communicated, I was like, nope.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen like their successes, like it seems like they're doing well. And I just, sometimes you just don't have that feeling that it's going to be the right fit. Right.
Right. Yeah. We had that too.
In terms of quotes, like obviously I'm a big believer in just, I love motivational quotes and inspiration and stuff like that. So is there any particular quote that resonates really well with you guys?
So I kind of have two, and they're from my, like, right at the very beginning when everything sort of changed. And one is the big one for me is from Marie Forleo. Everything is figure outable. Like, that really, I don't know. It's so simple now.
Yeah.
I don't even think about it, but I live my life by it.
Yeah.
But the fact that everything is figure outable and you don't need to stress about everything.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful gift. And the other one is from my friend Melanie Robinson, who said, if you're going to make it up good. Yeah. And that's the whole concept, is that we don't know what's going on in other people's heads. Yeah. When you're about to go on a call with an investor and you're really worried they're going to say no, or, oh my God, I'm going to come across weird. Like, take a deep breath. Just imagine the most positive thing happening as opposed to the most negative thing happening. Yeah. Because if we're all just making things up in our heads all the time. Yeah. So if you're going to make it up good.
Yeah, no, I love that. Now, for anyone that does want to connect with you to learn more about the opportunities that you guys have, how can people get a hold of you?
So our Facebook, we're just on Facebook as Coast to Coast Homes Canada, and you can message there. Instagram is Good Homes Canada. Our website is coasttocoasthomes.ca. And then you can just email us at info@coasttocoasthomes.ca.
Great. So thank you for your time. We'll include all that in the details below. Obviously, if you like what you've just seen, make sure that you have subscribed and you're following along at Inspired to Invest podcast. Thank you so much for your time today, Nicole. And for anyone watching, make sure that you remember when you invest in yourself, the sky's the limit. Thanks again to our sponsor, Control and Compound Financial, for bringing you this episode of Inspired to Invest. The views represented on this podcast are for general information only and does not constitute investment or other professional advice or an offering of securities. The host and guests featured on Inspired to Invest make no representations as to the performance of any particular investment. Should you decide to make an investment, you are responsible for conducting your own review and analysis. It is recommended that you obtain independent legal, accounting, and tax advice from licensed professionals.